Welcome, my name is Evgenia, and in this video we will review the writing section for the academic module of the IELTS exam. We will review the structure of this section, focus on the types of tasks and skills required, as well as on how these tasks are assessed by the examiners. I want to note that depending on the version of the test that you are planning to take, be that paper-based or computer-based, the way of completing the section varies. So if you are taking the paper-based version of IELTS exam, you will write your essays by hand. And if you're taking the computer-based version, all of the essays have to be typed on the computer. So there are two formats. You will be offered two tasks in the academic writing section. The first task requires you to analyze or synthesize graphic information. You will be offered graphs, charts, diagrams, tables, maps, and other forms of visual information, and you will be required to provide a description of main trends, main themes, and write at least 150 words. The second task requires you to write an analytical or argumentative essay depending on the task type. Here you may be offered an opinion that you need to agree or disagree. You may be given a problem and you have to analyze causes and possible solutions. We will review those type tasks in detail a little bit later. And you have to write at least 250 words. In total, you will get 60 minutes to finish the writing section. And in general, you should spend 20 minutes on the writing task 1 and about 40 minutes on writing task 2. Here you actually can distribute the time as you wish, and these are just suggestions. Before we review each of the essay tasks in details, I want to focus on the assessment criteria used for the writing section. So there are four criteria used to assess each of the essays. The first criteria is task achievement, basically how well you develop and how complete is your answer based on the question asked. The second criteria is coherence and concision, so that means the ability to use appropriate rhetorical structures based on the question, as well as write in a concise language. The third criteria is lexical resource, so your ability to precisely choose words based on the context of the question. And finally, grammatical range and accuracy, because again, each question implies certain grammatical structures, tenses that you have to demonstrate. To be able to write a successful essay, you need to know different types of tasks that you may encounter in writing task 1 and in writing task 2. Let's take a look at one of the examples. So in this chart, you are offered, the chart shows the number of men and women in further education in Britain in 3 periods and whether they were studying full-time or part-time. So you're required to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and by making comparisons where relevant. So in order to do this task successfully, you should be able to identify trends and select main characteristics of graphs and differentiate them from minor details. So the second type of task asks you to describe a process. And again, let's take a look at the example. Here you are offered a graph, the visual information, the diagram of how hydroelectric power generation works. And you need to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features. So to write a successful essay here, you should be able to dissect a process into several key stages and within each stage provide relevant details. And the third one is where you are asked to compare and contrast visual information. Let's say Again, we have an example of a park, Peyton Park, and its current stage, as well as a proposed plan of renovations. And so this essay would be different in terms of structure, because what you actually have to do is to compare what will remain similar and what will be different, and hence organize the essay accordingly. So it's very important to know the task types, as the task and the question at hand will actually determine the essay structure that you need to use, the transition words and syntaxes that will be widely applied in your essay and which will contribute to your scoring criteria, which is to fully address the question and to provide cohesive and concise summary, as well as to choose grammar and vocabulary appropriately. So, in general, the essay writing approach would look the following way. First, you have to analyze the data and identify trends and dissect it into major and minor details. Then, depending on the task type, you have to decide what structure of the essay you're going to use, how you're going to organize your introduction, your thesis statement, how you're going to divide the information into paragraphs, and what transition words you're going to use. Then, as you write your paragraphs, you have to decide what your topic sentence would look like and what details you're going to use to develop those main ideas. And then finally, to make sure that your essay is concise. For example, if you are writing an essay that requires you to compare, so you're going to use comparative syntax structures, whereas, for example, in the process essay, you will be describing it into stages, so the syntaxes used will vary. And same with the grammatical structures and vocabulary, as they will be defined or determined by the topic at hand. Okay, so let's now move on to the writing task 2 and do the same thing. Look at what task types you may encounter here and what you have to be prepared for. So in general, here are 4 task types that you may encounter, and the first one is when you are presented with an opinion and you are asked to either support or rebut presented point of view. Let's take a look at the example. So the example provides a situation where the number of vehicles on the British roads has risen significantly from 1888 till 2000, and the opinion here is that alternative forms of transportation should be encouraged and international laws introduced to control car ownership and use. And so the question to you is, to what extent do you agree or disagree with an opinion? And you have to write at least 250 words. So the second type is discuss 2 opinions. So I may actually use the same kind of question, and I would ask you to discuss the opinion of those who believe that alternative forms of transportation should be encouraged and those who would be against this type of law. And then I would even ask you to provide your own opinion on the topic. Okay, so the third one is to discuss problem, causes, and possibly offer solutions. So the question may vary, and you have to be very careful what exactly they ask. So let's look at the example here. So in many developing countries, there are major problems with the quality of air and water from both industries and constructions. So what problems has this created? Which means that you have to analyze the consequences of the problem. And the second part of the question asks you to look into solutions, to provide solutions that may prevent these consequences. And the final one is compare and contrast type of essay, or also a very frequent version of it where you ask to discuss advantages and disadvantages of certain aspects. So again, let's take a look at the example. And here we have the lead that not everything that is learned is contained in books. And you have to, and then the alternative form of learning is to learn by doing. So you have to compare and contrast knowledge gained from experience versus knowledge gained from books. You do not only have to compare them, but also then state your opinion which source of knowledge is more important and why. So it contains the analytical part where you compare and contrast, and then the final paragraph will require you to state your own opinion. So these are the 4 types of tasks that you may encounter in task number 2. There are again variations, and you have to be very careful in reading the question, because it will contain specific aspects that you have to address. In comparison to task number 1, where the information is provided and the visuals are provided, and you have to be able to use those visuals to develop a well-structured essay, the difficulty of the second task has to do with the fact that you have to bring in your own examples and support your opinions with facts and information that is a part of your knowledge resource. And again, the approach to writing this essay would be very similar to writing task 1, except here you would have to really focus on the question and make sure that you address each part of the task so that you can score high on the task achievement criterion. Depending on, again, the task type and question at hand, you will organize your essay accordingly. So the introduction will be different, the thesis statement will be different, depending whether you have to present an opinion, or you have to compare and contrast to different things, or if you have to provide a balanced opinion where you first analyze the two and then provide an opinion. And that all will dictate the development of the essay, the development of paragraphs, as well as the use of syntax, structured grammar, and vocabulary that is similar to task number 1. And the final section for today is how essays are scored and how you get basically the final band score in this section. After you have written your essay, each task will be scored in each of the criteria and based on bands from 0 to 9, based on the scoring descriptors. And each criterion contributes 25% to the total grade for that specific essay. So for task 1, for example, it's going to be a mean of scores, 4 scores in each of the criteria, and then same will be for task number 2, and then the overall grade for your writing section would be the mean for the mean of the 2 tasks. So this was the overview of the writing section of IELTS exam, its academic module, and specific strategies on how to write specific types of essays that we have reviewed in this section will be addressed in different videos. And for now, I wish you good luck and successful preparation for IELTS exam.